All right, I'd like to call the regular meeting of the Edina Park Board February 12th to order. Start with
Member Deeds? Here. Member Segreto? Here. Member Sella? Here. Member Steele?
here.
Member Giesecke?
Here.
Member Jacobson? Here. Member Jones? Here. Member Hulbert? Here. And Member Catherine Peterson?
Here. Great. All right, and then the approval of the meeting agenda. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Adoption of the consent agenda.
I move approval. I second.
All those in favor? Aye. All right, and then we have community comments. Not seeing anyone in the audience. Moving on to reports and recommendations. The first item in the agenda is the edible playground public hearing in Lewis Park. If you notice, I believe Janet put emails that we received on this item. If you didn't have a chance to look them over yet. So I'm going to open up the public hearing. Seeing no one from the audience right now, we can move to discussion. Do you want to say anything, Ian?
We have Kristen Arswold, our recreation supervisor here, that is in charge of the program. She has prepared a brief PowerPoint presentation if you'd like to see it. To be honest, it's very similar to the PowerPoint presentation that you saw in December. So I'll let you decide whether or not you would like her to show that presentation, or Kristen would be available just to answer questions if you'd like.
Would anyone like to see the PowerPoint? You have questions?
I have a question, Kristen. When I went through the letters, I think several of the letters talked about sun on the site that has been selected, and that it didn't receive. I can't remember what they said, but they said that it wasn't a sunny location.
Yeah, I did see those emails, and I'll be talking with Bob Prestrud. When we went out and looked at that site, that was one of the areas he suggested and thought it would get enough sunlight, so we may have to look at inching it. Well, I guess that would be north. But there's enough room, I think, within that pad between where the fields end to where the path starts, that if we have to move it a little bit, and when we looked at it, it was fall and the leaves were gone. So we'll have to just see if we need to move it just a little bit in order to get more of that sunlight.
Yeah, I'd like to make sure that that's part of the condition, that if we do decide to move ahead with this, that the site that we put this on gets at least 8 hours of sunlight.
We will be able to, I think, make that work at Lewis. There's enough room in that area to make sure we get 8 hours.
I thought the emails were fun for change. Nobody was complaining. Everybody seemed to be in favor. I thought the two suggestions I think you should take a look at is, I think, a plan for, okay, what's disposal look like, or if this ends, what's it look like. I think that was a very good suggestion. And I thought the one about soccer balls actually was a really good suggestion, and the potential to put some kind of netting or something over it might be wise.
We'll look into that, and probably as problems arise, be looking at some problem solving as it comes up.
How close is it going to get to the soccer fields? Because I think they're no longer going to be resting a field at that park, so it's going to be a lot more active.
Yeah, and when I met with Bob, like I said, he's our park maintenance superintendent. So the sites that we looked at, he didn't feel it would be in play or we would have any issues with the soccer. What I think we'll do is I'll go out again with Bob in the spring here and make sure that we're meeting the requirements of the 8 hours of sunlight, and then I can give you an exact location, and because we will probably have to move it a little bit from where we had proposed this time around. Does that make sense?
I would add to that also that we did share this plan with the soccer club, and they had no concerns in that area.
I just wanted to note, I think this was probably the first harebrained idea that Ann had as director, so it's kind of a momentous occasion.
Okay. I do have a couple other comments. The other piece of this before we can recommend approval would be that I'd like to find out, or at least set a stipulation. It is going to cost quite a bit of money, and I see that you have requested a grant and have obtained some pledges. But I would make as a condition, since our park board can't just pull $11,000 out of the air, that you obtain all of those pledges and grants before anything is started. So that's what I would also work on, state as a condition for moving ahead with this.
And absolutely, Ellen, in my timeline you'll see, but before we do anything, my funding is to be secured in March before we would start doing any purchasing of materials or doing any movement at the park. We'd have those funds in an account that the city has designated for the edible playground.
Okay. Does anybody else? I have another comment. In the past, we had talked about using the irrigation system of the soccer field just to spray onto this. And I am concerned because I'm looking at the fencing is wood, right?
Yeah.
And I just don't think that this is a wise idea to just spray wood fencing with water as the water source. It seems like a recipe for it to rot at an earlier age than it would need to. So I'm just wondering if you have another plan for that?
We actually do. I am going to a schoolyard garden workshop put on February 22nd out at the Minnesota Landscape Arboretum. One of the things I did learn is that tomatoes should not have water sprayed directly on them. They should be watered from the bottom. So these are things I'm learning as I go. So yeah, we will have to come up with a plan B on how we're getting water out to the site. I have no problem letting 30 children carry buckets of water from a park building out to our, water source. We will be able to tap into that if we wanted to make a spigot. But part of this is the effort the kids are putting into this. Part of it is that it's, kind of a fun opportunity. We can run a hose and make it a fun activity. And that's the main purpose, is for us to have fun and hopefully produce some good, healthy food.
Sorry. Will we need any extra insurance because this is out there? Because they're doing gardening?
No, we won't.
Okay. And I'm looking through my notes. Sorry. Is this going to be locked?
Yes. We will have a padlock on both the shed and on the front gate.
Okay, so is there going to be any time, so we're not envisioning this to be open at all to the community?
It's really designed for kids who are registered in our playground program. No different than kids who might sign up for a soccer camp and they're using the soccer balls just for that program. It's really designed for the children and their families. We did discuss there may be an opportunity where we could do a realtor-type box, where if we wanted to have a place that we could have a key, and if a family wanted to come in. I'm going to actually probably plan a few nights where families can come out, and it'll be me, and they can come down with their parents and see it, some open house type things like that. But no, it really is designed for the use of the kids as a programming tool for kids who are part of our summer playground program.
Is this the way school-type gardens normally work? Are they locked during the off hours?
don't know on that one. I'll maybe find out more on February
Yeah,
22nd.
I don't know either, and I'm a little reluctant because the rest of our parks are, while they may be scheduled, the fields may be scheduled at certain times, the rest of the time they're open to the community. And so I'm just trying to figure, I don't really know my philosophy on this, but I actually am just thinking it through, and I'm a little uncomfortable with it being only offered to a select group of children, 30 or whatever. Here we're building this little space for 30 kids, and not having it available or open at any other time.
I only can speak from experience that I've talked with from the Eden Prairie folks who have the garden, and they locked it, I think, mainly as a deterrent. So you wouldn't get vandals who are coming in who may think, oh, this is fun, I'll just steal some tomatoes and go throw them at my neighbor's house. I don't know. Just throwing that one out there. But, yeah, it is, at a schoolyard garden, it's designated for those who attend that school and for the different classes or the different, students that are at that school. So for us, we really did look at it as a programming for opportunity for the kids who attend Lewis Park. Now, that doesn't mean any kid who lives in Edina can't register for Lewis Park Playground Program and come out there and participate in that site. It's open to anyone to register, and we're kind of hoping that becomes a unique way for us to build a little program out of there. That's our edible playground site, and my kids like gardening, and so I'm going to sign up at Lewis Park.
Okay, so just in somewhere else in this background material, I saw that you were targeting certain students to be participants, but that's not really what I'm just hearing, is that it is really going to be open and accessible to all residents.
Absolutely.
And that you aren't going to be giving any preferential treatment to anyone.
No. Currently at our site, we take 75 children. That site has never filled. It actually has been, one of our sites where we typically get 30. I will be targeting the kids who live in Oak Glen Apartments. They'll get a mailing at Oak Glen, flyer in their lobby, just to let them know that this is happening. And then I will be working with the Creek Valley ELL teacher to get some information out to those students. But anyone in the area is, more than welcome to sign up for those. And we also have our 3 camps that will be offered in August. So those will be 3 additional camps that anyone will register, and we hope we get some 20 or so kids in those camps, 3 weeks of camps for edible playgrounds too. Does that make sense?
I actually don't see this any different than we locked the locker rooms at Braemar Arena. We have a lot of facilities that we lock up and are only used for specific sports teams or specific undertakings that are not directly open to the public at all times. So I don't see this as substantially any different than that. It's a small space. We're not taking up a large chunk of the park. So I don't think it changes the way in which we operate relative. Like I said, we lock up all the lockers we lock up the locker rooms at Braemar. That's not open to the general public. I'm sure there's a chunk of the golf course over there that is locked up and, members only or something along those lines. So that I don't see as a particular concern. Thank you.
And we do have kids who sign up for Normandale because they've got great basketball hoops there, and we have kids who sign up for different parks for different reasons, and we kind of like that. That's kind of the culture of the neighborhood and culture of the area, and it's kind of fun.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the drawings, and I'm thinking, well, if a soccer ball goes in there, do we need to lock it up because there's going to be more damage done trying to climb over than just by leaving it open, and you're not really keeping out any vandals with locking a 4-foot-high fence. So I'm just wondering if that makes sense to do.
I think I'm open to leaving it unlocked if you're open to leaving it unlocked. If we feel like that's a good, I heard that the only information I have about this is through Eden Prairie's and their experience, and they locked it. So I thought, okay, well,
Yeah.
I'll do the same. And they did it particularly for trying to keep vandals out. And they didn't have any problems with vandalism last year, but I think that was their main purpose.
And like I said, I don't know. And maybe this is something that you ask at that
Yes.
workshop, that maybe there's a best practice that none of us are aware of,
Yeah.
and I'm certainly not.
It will be a great learning experience to go on the 22nd.
It seems like one other good reason maybe to lock it would be to prevent the deer from coming in. If kids are playing and they leave the door open, if we don't lock it, then animals can come in more easily.
Absolutely.
Well, this is an action item. Are there any more questions for Kristen?
I'm sorry, what? I don't know the answer to that question. Yeah, you may or may not be able to keep the deer out. Depends on how high they can jump, I guess. What can a deer jump? 5 feet? I don't know.
They can go over 6.
Over 6. Oh, well, we probably won't be doing a 6-foot fence around it, but I will be talking with Bob, and he'll let me know as park maintenance what he suggests will be part of. That'll come into play.
Yeah, were there any additions to Kristen's proposal? If not, is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to move to approve the edible garden in Lewis Park.
All right, further discussion?
I'd like to just reiterate the conditions that there be enough sunlight for a successful garden, which I believe would be 8 hours in the summertime, and that all funding is secured as stated in this document.
All right, seeing no further discussion. All those in favor? Aye. Oppose? Motion passes. Thank you very much, Kristen. All right, the next item on the agenda is the Yorktown Park Pilot Community Garden Rules and Policies.
All right, good evening. What you should have in your packets would be a copy of the agenda from the working group meeting, the objectives of the working group, a comparison chart that has information that we collected from all the other cities, surrounding cities, I should say, a project timeline, and then the proposed rules and policies. So our initial step in coming up with these rules and policies was to assemble a working group, and the members of the working group are listed on that agenda. We felt like the first step in defining our rules and policies was to really look and do some research to find out what other cities have done, and the policies and rules that they have adopted. So we contacted MRPA. They sent out a request for information to all the cities in Minnesota who currently have a community garden. We also used the resource Gardening Matters to obtain our information. We collected the information. We really spent some time looking through all the different rules and policies that other cities have developed. We created that chart that you should have in your handout. We presented a draft of these rules and policies to our community garden working group at the January 30th meeting. The working group provided some great suggestions, some additions, some changes. And tonight we're hoping that you will approve our rules and policies for the Yorktown Community Garden Pilot Project. So I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have about the rules and policies.
Thank you. Are there any questions?
I was trying to read through it and figure out, does this set it up as organic? essentially. I was trying to read through the rules, and I couldn't
Yeah.
quite get around it. So is it set up as essentially organic produce, and the rules are such that that's what it will be?
Correct.
Okay.
And,
If-
oh, go ahead.
If response to this garden is high, and there are more people who are interested in gardening than plots permit, I noticed that number 2 of the regulations say that returning gardeners will be given first preference the following year. Is that what you found as you researched, or are there any other municipalities or communities that do the second year and subsequent years by lottery?
You know, that's a great question. Some cities did use a lottery, but the majority of the cities that we looked at did it as a preference, so a priority. If you had a community garden, say in 2012, you were given that priority in 2013. And, that would be something that we could certainly look at doing a lottery system too for our next year.
Yeah, I guess maybe that decision might be made after you gauge what the interest in the
Yeah.
garden is.
Yeah.
Because I would hate to see this become a garden just for, how many plots will there be?
I think right now approximately 50 plots starting out. And, the nice thing about the location that we're selecting is there possibly could be room for expansion if we find that the gardens are extremely popular.
As I looked at the rules and procedures, that was the only one that struck me as something that I would question why we were doing it. And I just think that's one that we should agree that we will revisit at the end of this gardening season to see what the demand for those plots were. I would hate to see that people who just sort of figured out and got in on it at the ground floor this year, then, have those plots forever and no one else can, get involved in the whole program. That would be a shame.
Okay.
Well, I actually think, I don't know, we could do it by lottery or not, but I think one of the reasons some community gardens do have that type of priority is because there becomes an active group community that takes care of that garden, and in order for that to happen, there usually is some type of legacy and things like that. But I would suggest that in the section that says whatever, if we're going to use lottery or not, but if you have, if we are going to keep that stipulation that you would have to have, that you would be giving priority to former garden plot holders, that if they had not been if those gardens had not been maintained, that they would lose their priority.
Yeah.
I would suggest, we want to see turnover. I'd like to see approximately 50% turnover every year kind of thing. So, it's really a question to review these after the second year.
Yep.
Kind of what kind of turnover are we getting, or are they getting locked, are they getting locked up? And, that's just an empirical question that until we run it, we don't know.
Yeah. I think when we were kind of putting these rules and regulations together, we realized that we may have to make some changes next year. We'll kind of, for us, it's really going to be a trial and error. And we can certainly, we'll take some great notes and, make sure that we're ready to make those changes needed for next year.
And I would like to add one comment to what Susan said as well. The way that we're designing the garden is that essentially we will have 3 long rows of gardens in the first year, and the plots will either be 10 by 10 or 10 by 15. And in the space that we're allocating in the first year, we'll actually have room to add another row in that existing fence. So it leaves us good room for growth. And as Susan mentioned earlier as well, in the space that we've selected, we would have, if we would choose, we would have the opportunity to expand the garden out to the east, or excuse me, to the west as well. So.
And I'm just wondering, we're talking a little bit about numbers and things. Do we have any idea how many people would actually sign up for this?
We, in our research, that was a question that we asked, is how many plots was an average, and that information is included in the diagram that we gave. We really did feel that 50 is a really great goal to set to start out.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry, that wasn't really my question, but it was how many Edina residents would be interested in participating?
We haven't had an opportunity to actually do a survey, but the gardens, and I should let Susan talk to this, but the gardens will be open to Edina residents first, and we wouldn't open them up to non-residents unless we had extra space available after a certain date. But we haven't had an opportunity to survey. You know, this project was just given to us in December, so we haven't had an opportunity to gauge interest yet. But all we can say is based on the information that we've seen from our neighboring communities, they've been popular and they do fill up.
No, we decided to not offer raised beds this year just because of our time constraints, but certainly we'll look at possibly adding that in phase 2 next year.
Just a consideration on the waiver, it references in there my child, and I'm not sure that this is necessarily a program geared for children, so you might want to consider changing it to say my family.
Okay, thank you.
Also, I would, the garden plots that I know about don't allow hoses because of the amount of water that can be used and wasted, so I would recommend that you don't allow any use of hoses in the garden plot, especially if we're bringing in the water with our water buffalo.
It's interesting that you bring that up, because that's a discussion that we've been going back and forth on a lot, and we're very interested in your input. And this is something that we'll certainly be talking with our working group further. And we've gone both ways, because that was exactly our concern. We don't want to see water wasted, but we also don't want to create a hardship for people to have to carry water long distances. So we're certainly open to any suggestions.
Is there a reason for no pets? I'm curious. I mean, with people working in there with small dogs, et cetera, I don't see a particular problem. But is that something that's established in most of these, and so there must be a reason?
Yeah, you know, and I don't know the exact reason, but the cities that have a community garden all have kind of the no pet policy, and I don't know if it's, you know, just a respect for other gardeners type of thing. But
I would think that you would want to allow, you'd want to be more specific in the language about pets, that maybe you could allow pets in the general garden area, but not in the planting area, because it'd be about, you know, waste and food and not having it mix. So just be more clear.
Okay, great suggestion.
I've read that there are some that are fairly specific about what is a unkept garden plot, and I think that you've kind of indirectly stated it. And there was one that I thought was worded well in a garden in rules, and I think that we can work on the wording in the work group. So what you're proposing is that we are going to talk about this further in the working group?
We're actually we're asking for approval of these rules and policies. If you have any changes that you would like to see made, we can certainly do that. In the meeting in January, we handed out the rules and we asked for people to submit any changes to us, and some people did, and we did incorporate those changes. We're happy to make any other changes that you might suggest.
Okay, well, so then I would just add, if weeds are growing 12-inch tall or more, if weeds are growing 12 inches tall on more than a third of your plot, or if you've extended your plot beyond the assigned boundary lines, you'll be contacted by the Park District by phone or email. You'll need to respond to this communication. Gardeners will then have 2 weeks from the day we notify you to take the appropriate action before the plot will be mowed. You're expected to maintain your plot during any extended absences. So it kind of specifies the process and what would be what is the hurdle that makes it so much of an eyesore if it's the weeds over, so this is why I would suggest that you add that.
Yeah, and Ellen, we are, in addition to the rules and policy, we're also working on like an application form that also lists kind of gardener expectations, and that would be another area that we could include that specific part on the weeds in that section too.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's...
And in general, I agree with what you've laid out, and I just was thinking that since we want to welcome people to the gardens, if there is a way that you can word this so that it is friendlier and more welcoming and more encouraging, because certainly when you are signing up for a garden plot, you want this to be a fun experience, and I think that there's ways of saying exactly the same thing, but either wording it a little bit differently, grouping it a little differently or something.
Will there be any resources for like first-time planters or?
Yeah, there will be.
Okay.
Yeah. There will be some master gardeners that we will be working with, and we're hoping to be able to set up certain nights that will have a master gardener available for those people who may want further advice.
And maybe this is a question for Anne, but say going forward in July, there's some issue that we didn't anticipate. How will we approach that, or you approach that?
We're going to be setting up a gardeners committee. We haven't named it yet, but we will have a staff representative, and then we will have a smaller representation of our working group, and that will also include some actual gardeners in the community garden, and they will be helping to mediate any issues that we might have.
And will this area be locked? Just asking.
We hadn't planned on locking the area.
And the difference between this and the other?
This isn't quite as close to like a general field area. Like I think there's not going to be soccer balls flying around.
No.
Really?
And this is designated as a community garden. The other garden at Lewis Park is part of the park program, and it's a program you sign up for to participate in with a fee to, as a child, it's like signing up for a soccer camp or it's like garden camp. So that is why, as I would understand it, that you're there gardening under the supervision of the park personnel. But there's a difference, and this is when anybody who has their plot feels like coming and gardening.
And I would totally concur with that. Both of these programs are considered to be pilot programs. We've never done this before. We've been just doing our very best to utilize the great resources that we've had in terms of the people on our working group, and also the resources that we've been able to collect through the Minnesota Recreation and Park Association. And what I can say is that we will be reviewing this constantly, and we'll be prepared to make any changes that we need to make in either garden to make it a successful experience for all participants.
I know we already talked about this, but one of the general rules is to give plots to Edina residents first. I know other communities are probably a little bit ahead of us with community gardens, and there might be a little bit of an education curve for our residents to know that this exists. So if it takes a little while for this to fill up, I'd just like to see going forward, if only 25 residents step up year one and they want a plot, and residents from other communities come in and then it's full, I would still like to see it subsequent years that Edina residents, it's taken a while for it to get to this point, every year have some sort of precedence over plots versus other community residents.
Yeah, I think what we anticipate doing next year is having a registration period, probably in January, made available first for previous gardeners as well as Edina residents, and then open it up, the following month, for example, if the still plots are available for non-residents.
Should the non-resident fee be higher than the resident fee?
That's a great question. In doing the research, we didn't find that any other cities offered different rates for residents and for non-residents. Some cities only made the garden available for residents of that city. So that certainly, could be a possibility.
Were you, maybe I'm misunderstanding this, but do non-residents retain the right as returning gardeners to keep their plot year after year?
That's a great question. My initial answer would, and I think Ann and I have talked a little bit about it, would be no. Because again, even though they were a previous gardener, Edina residents would have first priority.
Good.
And maybe we need to specify that a little bit more in the rules.
Okay, and the last is, I didn't see, but I'm sure you've done this, but you've checked for utilities under that spot.
We're working with our engineering department right now to create a site plan for it, yes.
Yeah. It was, I understand we're doing the whole thing. And the other piece is that it has 8 hours of sunlight. I'm assuming that it does.
That is a very bright and sunny location. The other thing that we're doing on this site is soil testing. So that'll be completed.
Yeah, I would suggest that you just list the priorities. So, priority 1, returning gardeners who are Edina residents, priority 2, Edina residents, priority 3, returning non-Edina. I just make a quick list on that so everybody understands the priorities when they get into it.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, this is an action item.
I move to approve.
Great. Further discussion?
Just that some of the suggestions that we've made that everyone has agreed are appropriate would be incorporated into the rules and procedures as they finally come out.
Any other discussion? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, Susan. Next item on the agenda is the Yorktown Park Pilot Community Garden Parking.
Thank you. I will take this one on, and where I'd actually like to start with this one is referring back to in your agenda to the previous item, item B, and I just want to talk very briefly about our timeline. As we discussed in our last meeting, we have a very aggressive timeline to get this project open by the middle of May. And I can honestly tell you that we don't have 2 weeks to miss a step here. So we've been working really hard. I appreciate Susan's efforts and the efforts of our working group to get us to the point where we are today. As you see, on February 1st, we had a goal to have our rules and policies set. We're working on location and parking. And the next big thing for the park board will be a public hearing that'll be at our next park board meeting. So we are finalizing a site plan with our engineering department, and we hope to have a mailing out at the very beginning of next week to notify neighbors within 1,000 feet of this property. And again, we'll hold the public hearing at the March 12th meeting. And then if it receives approval from the park board, we'll be taking it to the city council on April 2nd. And after that, we'll start construction. So we have a lot of work to do in a short period of time, but we're really very, very excited about this project. And thank you for your support on it. Very early on in the beginning stages in January, Susan and I took the opportunity to sit down and meet with Greg Hanks from the Y, because we realized that parking is an issue at Yorktown Park. We have a nice green grassy area at that park, but we don't have any parking that's owned by the city. So we looked at a couple of options, and the first option was to approach the Y and see if they might be interested in a shared parking use on their back lot, which is on the very eastern side of their building. And we had a great meeting at the Y, and what came from that meeting was a possible partnership opportunity with the Y. I don't know if many of you are Y members or are familiar with the parking situation over there, but they do run into a lot of parking capacity issues in the lot at a variety of times during the day and during the year. And so they expressed some concern about using their parking lot for gardening. We talked about the fact that during the summer is when they're not as busy, and we would probably never have more than 10 or 15 cars max in the parking lot. But they still had concern because during the summer they run a lot of camp programs, and the camp programs and the buses come out of that back parking lot. So what was proposed, at least very tentatively in the early stages, was a partnership with the Y on creating a parking lot on the very corner of Yorktown Park adjacent to the existing Y parking lot. And again, we're in the very early stages, but the Y is proposing that they would actually build and maintain that parking lot, again, on our Yorktown Park property, and give Yorktown Park City of Edina users access to that facility, to that parking lot year-round. Two benefits for us. One would be a really great dedicated parking lot for the community garden, which we don't have access to any parking anywhere else. And it would also give us a really great opportunity to provide a trailhead parking lot for the 9 Mile Creek Trail, which is going to be just on the very northern edge of the community garden. And again, there's no parking in that area, and we really feel like it would be kind of a double benefit for us in that space. So I've provided what is a very, very rough map that I actually did on PowerPoint, so I apologize. It's not what you're used to seeing from the engineering department, and it's certainly not to scale, but it's close. So what you see is the parking lot that is adjacent to the Y parking lot, and then a connection to the garden. And where this stands right now is, again, we've only had very preliminary discussions, and I told the Y that it was important that I first had this discussion with the park board to see if you had any interest in me pursuing this any further. So that's where we stand. So I'm interested in hearing your input.
And I've got a question. I mean, it looks like it's a reasonable request, though my concern is it's shared space, so would there be signage that designates certain time periods when it is for the community garden and when it's not? I would be concerned that there's overflow from the current YMCA situation that fills up to capacity and there's really no use for the garden folks.
That's a great question, Dan. Thank you. We have not taken our conversations to that level yet, but what I would anticipate is that we would want to sign certain spots as community garden parking only to help with that concern.
Seasonal.
What concerns me a bit is that this community garden is somewhat of an experiment right now. And if it is an experiment, and we make the commitment to enter into an agreement to build a parking lot, and the garden does not succeed, then we have a parking lot, but then we can park for the future of the bike trail, which also has some risk involved. I'd like to be open to the idea, but I don't see us judiciously doing it the first year. I mean, I'd like to tell the Y that, sure, we would be interested in it because it would be good for the city to have a parking lot there, but not hinged on this first year. I think we have enough going on with building the garden this first year. And the other question I have is, what about the shared bathroom situation? I mean, what will the gardeners do? Will they walk into the Y building and use the bathrooms, or?
We did have that discussion with them, and the Y is open to that. It's probably not ideal for them or for the gardeners, quite honestly, because of the distance that people would need to travel. But again, in a very preliminary discussion, the Y is interested. They have a very large porta potty contract throughout the metro area and probably the state of Minnesota. They have offered to just add another porta potty back to that area for us.
What about use of the bathrooms at the skate park? I mean, what is the skate park? Is that a Y facility also?
It's a partnership between the Y and the cities of Richfield, Bloomington, and Edina.
Is the bathrooms at the skate park closer? Because there are some residents who have negative feelings about porta potties, especially older residents. And what about using the bathrooms at the skate park? Is that a possibility?
We don't have bathrooms at the skate park. No, it's just essentially an admissions building there. We don't have restrooms. They would use the Y for restrooms. And we certainly have considered the aesthetic concerns of a porta potty in that area. And if we make this, extend it beyond a pilot program, I could see us building some sort of a perimeter shelter around the building to help shield it. We do that in a lot of parks.
And you mentioned the Durham parking. Can you run through a little bit of what that scenario might play out like? I see that that's very close as well to the proposed gardens.
Absolutely. We did have a discussion with the Durham about possibly partnering with them for parking. This year, they are undergoing a major renovation, and so they are going to be using that parking lot as staging for their renovation efforts. So this summer definitely would not be an option to use that parking lot. They also expressed concern that they reach capacity in their parking lot, so quite honestly, we did not feel that they were very interested in sharing that lot.
Can you just help me out? I'm not as familiar with this park as with some of the others in Edina. The green space that we're looking at, that it would be taken up by both the garden plots and the proposed parking lot, how is that green space used during the summer?
It's not programmed at all. And the Y used to use it for some of their athletic programs, and they don't use it anymore. So it's just open green space that's not programmed. And because of the access and lack of parking, it really receives very little use.
Thank you.
For the first year, could you just do it solves the permeability problem too. Could you just do a gravel parking lot with some drain tiles and assorted other things in it, rather than a full permeable surface? It solves the water runoff problem, makes it relatively inexpensive, makes it reversible if necessary. I mean, that would be, to me, seem a way of stepping into it. If the demand is there, then you can go back and put some kind of asphalt, or preferably some kind of permeable surface. I'm actually a little more concerned about, water runoff and the permeability and other things that we don't want to talk about around here, but that, we need to quit building non-permeable parking lots.
Well, definitely part of the approval process for a parking lot would require watershed district approval. So those are discussions that we've had at great detail in our office already. And we could certainly explore any option that the park board would be interested in having us explore for that area. As you know, we don't have a budget per se for this community garden, And so we're going to be asking the city council to allocate some funding for us for this garden. And we certainly aren't going to have money in our budget to provide even a temporary parking lot. We could certainly explore it with the Y, but to be perfectly honest, I don't know that they would be interested in funding a parking lot for this year that would be seasonal just for summer use, because they're really needing that parking lot during the winter. So as much as I see that it is a good idea, I don't know that it would be something that the Y would be interested in partnering with us on. We might be better off in just if you have concerns about the viability of the community garden for a year or 2 years, we might be better off just putting the community garden where we would put it and see if we can work out an arrangement with the Y to share their parking lot in the meantime.
Is it viable without the parking? The Y says, look, we're booked. We aren't. Is it viable without the parking lot? Is the community garden viable without the parking lot?
No, it's not. We definitely need parking. There's no doubt there's no other access other than bike access to that area, and we have no parking in that area.
I wish there was some other use for the parking lot during the winter or fall, or when you're not gardening, or if theoretically if the garden doesn't work and you don't do it after all, then you wind up with a parking lot that's there for not really any good reason. And especially if it's connected with the Y parking lot, it makes it seem like it's their parking lot. I guess I would suggest putting a little barrier or separating it away so it doesn't look like it's the Y's parking lot.
We could certainly explore that, and that is a point that Ellen actually made in our working group meeting, is there another way to gain access to that parking lot? And there really isn't another great viable option. The only other street access in that area is coming off of the street in Richfield, and it would be a pretty roundabout way to gain access to that. Certainly not. It would come off the cul-de-sac, exactly. It's not impossible, but I think it's an easier solution to make it adjacent, and it's certainly the best solution for the Y who would be funding this lot. Okay. And the only other thing that I would reiterate, and I certainly understand the concerns, I do really feel that it would be a large benefit to the 9 Mile Creek Trail and a drop-off point for bikes.
So the downside risk is essentially we give up a piece of parkland that is essentially unused at this point. Right?
Yes, that is correct.
Let's understand what the downside risk is. So the Y is going to build the parking. We're going to give them the land. The Y is going to take all the expenses and build the parking lot. They get additional parking. We get use of parking that may be good for the community garden and may well be really beneficial to 9 Mile Creek down the road. And the downside is that never happens, and the Y gets a parking lot, and we've lost whatever.
But we're not giving the land away. We're not giving the land away, are we? We're just letting them put a parking lot on our property, right? We could always.
I guess we could always ask them to tear it up. But I mean, there'd be a contractual agreement. Obviously, the Y's not going to put a parking lot in without a contractual agreement that the parking lot is there and protects that. Yeah, obviously. So essentially, the downside risk is we're giving up some land in exchange for them putting a parking lot in.
Let me throw a couple of ideas out there. That land essentially is unprogrammed. If we have a parking lot there, we have access, now we can maybe utilize it in a different capacity. So it might really help us year-round if we want to take advantage of that. And also there's the city fire building there. Any thought given to enhancing the parking in that facility and adding 20 stalls, something like that?
We haven't had that discussion, and we certainly could. We do have some constraints there with the access. There is a bridge with an underpass where the promenade carries through. I wouldn't say that it's not feasible, but I think it would be difficult with emergency vehicle access in that area. I'm not quite sure how it would fit in and how the fire department would feel about having residential traffic going through the parking lot with their emergency vehicles.
Okay.
I'm going to take another tact on this because I'm looking at this drawing and it quite frankly, putting in a 40-stall parking lot for a garden plot area that has 40 garden plots in it is so well beyond best practices in planning for garden plots that I just don't understand why we would be doing that. I'm really opposed to taking up any open space parkland for excessive parking. So I'm looking at what is an open place here, which is open space in an area that has a lot of concrete already. And I am totally against putting in 40 parking spaces in order to support this new community garden. I don't think that serves our community well, and I don't think that it is actually part of the long-term goal for the park district, which is to keep open space and parks. And so I would suggest that either we look at expanding the parking, if we feel we need more parking, if the city feels that it is their obligation to the Y to build parking for the Y, which this amounts to, then we could look into adding parking spaces by the fire department. But if it was just for the community garden probably would be served with far fewer than 40 parking spaces. Most of the people who signed the petition live in the Durham, which those people wouldn't even need parking spaces. So of those 40 signatures that are interested in using that garden, we wouldn't need any parking for them. So I want to go very, very slowly on paving over parkland. And if the secondary process is to say, well, we need it for a trailhead for 9 Mile Creek, well, there are many places where there is parking near 9 Mile Creek that we could say that there is parking by 9 Mile Creek Trail.
I share your concern about paving over green space in Edina, but if we're committed to putting in a community garden, we also have to be committed to providing some place for people who don't live in the Durham apartments to park if they want to utilize that community garden. And if we have no space for them to park to utilize the gardens, then it's not worth going ahead with the garden project. So we do have to look at, to make it accessible to as many Edina residents as possible, we have to solve the parking problem.
And I'm not suggesting that we not solve a parking problem, but I'm saying we don't need 40 spaces.
Also, I think there would be a lot of people that would come for the trailhead. Could you look into other trailheads? I know there's one by Wazetta, and from my experience, I've seen, 10 something cars, and then they have their trailers, and it does take up some space. So is there any way we can just talk with some other cities with the Three Rivers Park District and get an idea?
Sure, I'd be more than happy to do that. Where the 40 spots came from is from the Y. They're looking at making probably a $70,000 investment in this parking lot, and if they're going to make that investment, they want it to be worth the while to meet their needs. That's the honest answer to that question, where we came about the 40 spots. Do we need 40 spots for the community garden? No, we don't. Do we need 40 spots for a trailhead? No, we don't. This is just one opportunity to get a parking lot for the amenity that we're proposing.
Can I ask a question? How big is this? If there's parking, is this open space up here programmable in the sense of putting an athletic field in? Is it large enough? And what's the current condition of it? If you put 40 spaces in here, can you put a soccer field or something along those lines up in there that would then, the 40 spaces becomes useful for that too.
The Y used to program youth soccer, like pre-KK soccer. I mean, it's perfect size for that.
Yeah, no, it's great property. They used to have maybe 2 or 3 games going at once. So.
The one thing that I'll point out is it is definitely a grassy area. The fact that we would have a parking lot would give us the ability to do some programming there. I wish I had the dimensions here for you. I don't. The one thing that I do want to point out, though, from my diagram is that this is a 2009 map, and in our mapping system that we have for the city, that's the most recent map that we have access to. But since then, we have expanded the promenade, which is that walkway, to accommodate the 9-mile trail. So essentially, the bituminous path that you see on the north edge, that has at least doubled, if not expanded by 2/3, because we have that path and then we have another concrete path that is adjacent to it. So the other amenity that's in that area that certainly could be adjusted is we have a feeder path up in the area where you see kind of the paths in the corner of the tennis court where it kind of forms a Y. That's kind of a circular area with some bench seating, and there is a trail that comes off of that diagonally towards the skate park, and then there's a trail that goes around the skate park to gain access on the other side. So there are a couple of changes that you're not seeing visualized on this map.
Okay, so what I'm thinking is, since you're going to need to go back and talk to the Y about potentials, and we are reluctant to commit to a long-term paving over of a park, considering we have a pilot community garden going in. I do think that we would always use at least 10 spots for 9 Mile Creek Trail. So if you wanted to go, I would suggest that you go back and say, can we add on 10 spots? Would certainly help them, and we would see how this is used this year. And if we need more than 10, we can talk about it next year.
Another item I'd like to bring up, maybe somebody mentioned this, Richfield is directly there, right? That's the border. They're also a party to the Tri-City skate area, so they have an interest. Maybe it's worthwhile to talk about that cul-de-sac and expanding some kind of parking around there, even with access from the Y Edina side there. Maybe that would be a more pleasant way to go about this, and less green space being eaten up. They do have a say in this, because that would provide some access for their residents. I'm assuming because this is adjacent to Richfield, there's going to be some Richfield response to the community gardens, plus there's some access issues for Richfield to the Tri-City skate park.
I don't see Richfield being as open to funding that, but maybe Three Rivers Park District is, I don't know if you've spoken with them at all, but if they had other needs as far as, putting signs or amenities out specific to the trail.
I haven't had any conversations with the Three Rivers Park District at this point. I think, given our time constraints, I probably wouldn't have the opportunity to explore parking opportunities on any of these other venues. And if the decision by the board is that they're not interested in pursuing a parking option with the Y right now, then what I would do is discuss with them the viability of sharing a lot. And honestly, I'm not sure what that answer would be. Could it possibly, cause us to have issues with the viability of a park because we can't, or the community garden because we don't have parking? It possibly could. So I think those would be the options.
Okay. I'm trying to understand the current, skipping the community garden and everything else. The current utilization of this park is, I mean, so it's not programmed. I mean, it's a bunch of grass.
Underutilized.
And so without parking, it's going to remain underutilized, correct?
That is correct, yes.
Okay. So with parking, in conjunction with the Y, if there's a parking lot placed there, not only does it open up the community garden, but it opens up the potential for other programs and other utilization.
That is correct, yes.
Okay.
So my sentiment that I'm sensing from the park board is that we want minimal parking spaces that are the most environmentally friendly, but we need parking.
My first reaction was we're committed to doing this community garden, and I think it's going to be successful. I think a lot of people are going to want to use it. And I mean, I guesstimated that parking lot would be 50 grand. So if the YMCA wants to step up and pay $70,000 for a parking lot, I kind of want to play ball, you know. So if they're not going to want to just give us 10 to 20 stalls for a community garden, if the area's not being used, I mean, we need more dog parks. We need more youth, you know, small soccer fields. I don't want to just look at this and say we just want our 10 stalls and they're not going to want to do it.
Yeah,
I think we're missing an opportunity.
I'm concerned with the size, but then if you step back and talk about some of the discussion we've had, if we're going to utilize it in other ways and utilize that green space for potential ball fields, how many stalls would we want? You know, you're going to have 2 teams potentially coming. Maybe 40 is what would be in the ballpark.
Can you tell me what I think you're looking at the northern part of the park for a potential ball field? Is that what you're talking about? And doesn't that elevation change? That's not a flat area.
It's pretty flat.
In that area, the elevation is pretty flat. Where it gets steep is on the very eastern side of the skate park.
Okay. So I'm going to just go back to speaking for open space. I think that area is really built up, and I would suggest that if we are already taking up a quarter of the park for a community garden, I would suggest that there are people who really do enjoy just walking on grassy areas and having a place to throw a frisbee. And there, in this area, in Edina, there isn't. I think that there is another park, though, right adjacent to it, isn't there, in Richfield?
Adams Hill Park is on adjacent on the eastern side, yes.
So right now, the park is underutilized. It's not very well landscaped. It feels fairly industrialized with that skate park there. I think that we could use more trees to make it feel better. I don't think that that this is an ideal site for a soccer field. That's my other point, is that I think that there are other fields that would have make it feel better as you're biking or as you're walking around. I think that is not the most ideal setting for a ball field.
But soccer, we played soccer there. I mean, the kids play there all the time. I mean, you could ride your bike to the soccer field. It's right on the promenade. It would still be a green space. I mean, it's a big, if you look at those tennis courts as scale, it's still a large green space over there.
I'm really sensitive to the open space argument, Ellen. I agree with you. And I think that 40 spaces seems a lot. But for us to have this garden, we need to have parking. And I think we should take the opportunity of a partnership with the Y, because it's a good opportunity. And I don't know what the magic number is for the Y to say, okay, we'll do the construction. I suspect that it's not 10 spaces, and I don't know what else to say except that maybe 20 spaces feels better to me, A parking lot can always be enlarged, but maybe that's a good start.
I have a feeling that they're going to say however many spots we want, they're going to want at least that same amount. So if we're going to say we want 10 to 15, they're going to say they want 20 to 30 over there. Wouldn't you think? I mean,
Their expense and if we think we're going to utilize 15, they're going to say, well, we're not building it just for you. We want to serve our extra capacity. We want 30. Sure.
Well, we don't know what we need in connection with the garden. We don't know how many Durham apartment people are going to be walking over, but 40 just seems too much.
But I want to go back. Okay, we have, granted, it's open space and it's grass, but without any parking, it's in a city that is dense with very little space. We have an underutilized piece of land, and it is underutilized because nobody can park to make use of it. We have the Y willing to spend money to put in 40 spots, which makes it a useful piece of land for a much broader array, whatever it is we decide that is appropriate in there, whether it's ball fields or it's 9 Mile Creek or whether it's, a skating rink. I don't know what's appropriate in there, but it makes it a useful space. As we stand right now, it's underutilized. It's not a useful space. It's just a big piece of grass that we have to spend money mowing.
But if we do this parking lot, David, we're encumbering the land with a long-term parking easement and shared agreement if we talk about strategic planning, without a strategic plan for the park. And we don't know what the fate of this park will be in the future. So
this is a discussion item, and, whether you don't want 30 more spaces of parking, or you think 40 stalls would be great for soccer. I think Ann just brought us, the first discussions forward to kind of mull them over and think, is this something to consider? So we're not going to be able to pick the magic number that the Y will decide on tonight. So how does the park board feel about Ann going back and saying, what is the best offer you can give us? And then we can take a look at that.
And how do you think they would, I like Ellen's description, is we don't want to make it too industrial. I think we need parking. I think it makes sense and it's reasonable because it's zero expense to the city. We can utilize the park. Right now, we don't utilize the park. But I'm concerned about the look. Can we be greedy and tell them we want 30 spots instead of 40, and we'd like you to put some greenery around it as well to make it look pretty for the park? It is a park. We can ask, right?
Absolutely. I'd be more than happy to ask for anything that you suggest.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're going to want. I don't. When I see these item on the agenda that says discussion, and yet I think that you're going to want more of a feel from all of us on how we feel. I don't know if, since you're the one that's going to be actually moving this forward, is there feedback that you may want from all of us, each of us, to say, and what would that be? Would it be number of parking stalls, or would it be? I'm just trying to get your feeling about how to move this ahead and how we could make this discussion useful, so that it's not just, you're not only hearing from a few of us actually on this.
I do think what would be. It was a difficult one for me to put on the agenda, quite honestly, because we are so early on in the stage. We don't have an offer on the table from the Y, so I had a hard time asking for approval for something because I don't have an offer for you to approve. So it is a difficult question, that I brought to you tonight, and I certainly understand everyone's concern for the green space, and I share those concerns, and it's important to me that you all know that. In bringing the request for the 40 spots, it was based on a request from the Y for 40 to 50 spots, and I capped it at 40 spots. If it would be a recommendation from the group to maybe go back and ask them for a 30-spot lot or a 25-spot lot, I think that would be the kind of feedback that would be most helpful. And yeah, I think it would be helpful to me to hear from everyone in one way, shape, or form. And the next phase then would be, I could certainly be in touch with you all over the next month to kind of let you know how it's proceeding. The next phase is the public hearing phase and the approval of the project from the park board. And at that point, if we put a parking lot in that you're not interested in, at that point we could talk about taking it out or going back to the Y with another revision. The one thing that I will say is this project has been made very difficult because of the short time frame that we're working on. I mean, I literally don't have 2 weeks in play here to delay the project. So I wish we could be doing it differently.
More than 50?
My drawing is certainly not exact, but it is pretty close in terms of how, if you look at where it would intersect with the skate park. Our engineering department has done a much nicer drawing of what a parking lot would look like. Their drawing is not just a plain rectangle. It does have an in and an out, and it has some medians in there. It has some curbs, which would make it look like a nice parking lot, and certainly water retention and water drainage has been addressed as well. But yeah, I don't know, David, how large that parking lot is, but it is considerably larger than what we'd be proposing. My plan is pretty close.
I think it's hard to come up with a number without knowing what programs we could have in the future. And so I guess it would be helpful to have a few realistic ideas, because if we build this parking lot, I want to use the entire park.
And one thing that we haven't mentioned is we would like to do some programming at the community garden. We already have some interest from Fairview Southdale Hospital in holding some clinics and some gardening activities. I see this as a community meeting space. So in addition to any possible recreational use of that space, I see the community garden as a programming and an educational site.
I don't know whether you want to call it a sense of the board resolution or whatever, but I would recommend that we trust Ann a little bit and empower her to continue the conversations with the Y. I think it's reasonable to at least have the conversation, see what the Y is willing to do, and if, now, I'd be shocked if they came down to 20 spots and were willing to pay for a 20-spot parking lot, to be honest, but I think, my opinion or my sense is I'd like to see a motion that simply empowers Ann to continue the conversation, see where it's negotiated out, and see what the offer looks like.
Well, and I think our discussion has been fruitful in the fact that we've got a few discussion points for Ann as she goes forward, right? I mean, number of stalls is of concern to us, the amount of green space being lost, and can we beautify, if we do affect it somehow, we can beautify it. We need some designated use out of it, and maybe let them know we're thinking of future programming, maybe year-round somehow, but more than just the community gardens. Am I missing anything? So,
I assume we would be talking about a long-term easement for getting access to that park.
Yes, absolutely. And certainly we would have our city attorney help us draw up some long-term agreements for the use of this lot.
And they will take council approval. Right? I mean, well, I'm sorry, I was mumbling, but at the end of the day, this takes council approval.
So as far as timeline, since it's so tight, when do you think you'd have some kind of agreement? Is that with enough time to get the public hearing notice out?
The public hearing notice, as we have drawn up so far, includes a parking lot. We've been working with our engineering department to get that ready to go. So the plan as drawn to go out for a public hearing does include a parking lot. Again, we could take that out. We can use verbiage that the parking lot is subject to change. But that's what we were planning on doing at this point, unless we received other direction from the park board saying, absolutely, we are not interested in this option.
I think to be fair to the residents in the area, we would need to be very specific about what type and size of parking lot and garden that we're proposing in their neighborhood park. So I feel as if that is what public notice is all about, is telling them what to expect in the future. So I think that that's what you're saying. You're not just going to say there's a parking lot. You're going to actually...
We are actually going to have a parking lot drawn out. The parking lot that we have drawn out right now is 40 spots. And again, I wish that we had another month for me to negotiate this deal with the Y and then come back to you in another month. But unfortunately, I don't have it. If we push this decision back another month, we won't have a community garden until the middle of June. That's where the difficulty comes in.
So basically, the decision for us right now is, do we send it out for the public meeting notice with a parking lot or not, correct?
That is correct. And I think that I absolutely agree, Ellen. We want to try to make it as accurate as we possibly can. And I think in this case, if anything, we would be erring on the side of a larger parking lot. We certainly wouldn't be going any larger than that. So that would be one way to look at it.
I'll weigh in and say that, so as a few people have said, in order to support the community garden, we obviously need some parking. I think we should take better advantage of the space that we have there. As mentioned, my kids played sports there when they were little. On that field area. So it's kind of a shame that it's not being better used at this point. And I think having the parking there would support that, or some other programming.
Is there any further discussion? All right, I'm not seeing any further discussion. Thank you all for your comments, and we'll go onward with this, and feel free to keep us up to date, because it's going to be a quick process. So, all right. The next item on the agenda is the 2013 Park Board Work Plan Schedule. As most of you know, each year we kind of get a schedule. So this was just a continuation from our last park board meeting when we had approved all of our work plan items, or received our work plan items from City Council. And so this is just trying to get a better idea of how that workload will be spread out. And Anne, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Yes, thank you. At the last Park Board meeting, you asked if I would put together a more detailed calendar to show how we would be able to achieve all of the goals that we have set for 2013. And I've made an attempt at that, and I'm interested in any feedback, comment, any changes that you would like to see made.
And I just wanted to comment, I'm working with Anne to kind of shepherd the strategic planning process. So I pulled those items together because I thought that might be a doable timeline, completely open for suggestion, but I just wanted to, it helps to foresee how many months it's going to take. The idea is next Park Board meeting, we'll start digging into the strategic planning process, and hopefully it'll become much more clear how that will unfold.
A motion to approve the agenda, the work plan.
Is there a second?
Second.
Further discussion? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion passes. All right, and then the next agenda item is the Monarch Way Station at Arneson Acres Park.
Thank you. I was approached by the Garden Club Late Bloomers, and they are proposing to add a Monarch Way Station, a new garden at Arneson Acres Park, and I have attached a map to show you where this garden would be located. As I stated, they're really thinking that this is going to be a big draw that would actually receive some recognition from the National Monarch Society. And it'll be a native plant garden, and the Garden Club is very excited about this proposal, and they're hoping for your approval on the project.
I move approval.
Further discussion?
As long as the butterflies don't need their own parking spaces, I think it's fine.
That's a good one, thank
40
you.
additional spaces. I do have a question. And maybe you know this or not, maybe you don't. I'm looking at, I'm pretty familiar with this park. I live somewhat near there. Love this park. It's a beautiful open space. Why in particular did they pick that spot kind of in the middle of the park?
Tim Zimmerman is the city's horticulturist that really specializes in this park, and he felt that it was the best location. I'm sorry, I don't know anymore.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know, I have a butterfly question. Are the butterflies going to be tagged as a part of the tracking system? Because I mean, if we do this, it's really important to know where they're migrating, and that's how kids sort of get real excited about putting the labels on the wings.
That would be really cool. I'll talk to them about that. They hadn't mentioned it, but that would be really cool.
Yeah, it could be a school study project.
It's so cool putting those tags on the wings. Absolutely, it's really cool. And then you can track them when they get found. Uh-huh.
I don't know if they still do this, but in middle school, we raised butterflies for many months, and we learned quite a bit. So I'm sure there's lots of opportunity for collaboration.
And I have the website, monarchwatch.org.
Thank you. That's great.
All right, the motion's on the table. Any further discussion? All right, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? The motion passes. Moving on to correspondence and petitions. We have council updates. Ian?
Thank you, Kia. Kia asked me if I would include this item in all future agendas. And what we have done is we have put together a compilation of city council agenda items that directly impact parks or park board. And so what I would like to do on this agenda item monthly is to just take any questions. I can certainly go through them if you'd like, but I thought it might be a more efficient use of time if you have any questions about any particular items. The city council did vote 3-2 to change the residency percentage for the Edina Swim Club to receive priority access to the Aquatic Center and to be the recognized swimming association in Edina from 75% to 60%. And we are currently working to negotiate with both clubs to determine an agreeable use of pool time this summer.
I was wondering, could you give us a copy of that agreement, the new agreement, once it's done? I know that there was some talk about that before at the other meeting where they had mentioned it, that we were going to be coming up with a new agreement for preferred status.
A new agreement was actually completed and approved by the city council, I want to say back in April. I'd be more than happy to get you a copy of that.
Any other questions on council updates? All right, moving on to chair and board member comments.
I just want to thank our staff for all the work they did with the community gardens and the edible garden. But that community garden meeting was so well put together with respect to having all the paperwork for us to look at. And so I want to just say thank you, because that was really quite well done. And I'm hopeful that we will get a community garden in here by this.
Great. Any other comments?
Could we have an update on the dome project and both domes?
Both domes.
All domes.
So I'd be more than happy to. The Gulf Dome update. We did receive a preliminary insurance settlement offer from Travelers, our insurance company, and we are still a ways apart. We received an offer, and these are very rough numbers, so don't quote me exactly, but we received an offer of approximately $2.1 million, and we had requested $2.9 million. And we have two major code items that each item is between $400,000 and $450,000 apart. So those are the two big areas that we're working on trying to negotiate and receive some additional funding. Our goal is to try to finish those negotiations by the end of February and be able to take an offer and project plan to rebuild to the city council in March. And our goal is to try to start construction in April to be open by November 1st at the latest. So that's our goal. Again, we're running on a very short time frame, and we're doing the best that we can to negotiate the very best deal that we can for the city with Travelers. On the sports dome, we are working on compiling the data that we have collected from all of our athletic field users to determine outdoor athletic field needs. And it's been really quite a project. It was probably a 15 to 20 page survey that we sent out to all of our field users, asking them for current field use needs, future field use needs, and to really think outside the box, not necessarily in the fields that they're currently using. What type of space will they need? So our goal is hopefully within the next month we'll have that data compiled. we'll have met with the school district and we'll have a plan ready to present. So that's our goal. I've also been working with our consultants on the Braemar Athletic Field site to try to determine the size and location to best meet the needs and to be the most cost-effective option for a dome on that site. So we're still in those preliminary stages of that planning process.
Any questions on that?
Is there a timeline on the sports dome at this point? I've been asked by several people.
Our timeline on the sports dome is as soon as possible.
Boltman wants to know if he has it next winter.
You can quote her on that.
Yeah, I think that next winter might be a little bit of a stretch, but what I can assure you is that we're working as hard and as fast as we can to try to put together this data. I feel like we have one really great opportunity to show the park board and the city council what our needs are, and our sports dome work group, my hats are all off to all of you that help serve on that committee, that really showed the city council the needs that we have on our athletic field space. So I just want to make sure we have a really great opportunity that we get it right.
Mm-hmm.
So as soon as possible.
Any other questions on that item? Any further board member comments? All right, staff comments.
I have 2 items for you this evening. First, I am soliciting 1 or 2 volunteers to attend a March 19th City Council work session. The work session is in conjunction with Blue Cross Blue Shield via Dewtown, and they will present a health in all policies policy for the city. And what they would like to do is to provide a health lens in evaluating future city projects to consider healthy and active living components for possible project implementation for all projects that we implement in the future. And it's a way to sustain the Dewtown concept in our daily business decisions. And in this work session, the whole Community Health Committee will attend, and they're looking for representatives from the planning, transportation, and park boards. I don't know if anybody would like to...
When during the day is it?
It's a city council work session, so it would take place at either 5 or 5:30 p.m. And it would end between 6:45 and 7 p.m. that evening.
Okay, I'll volunteer.
Thank you, Louise. Okay, I have one more item for you this evening. In December, if you recall, when we brought the Braemar mountain biking trail to the park board, the comment was raised by the park board that they would like, if we have items like that, they would like me to bring it to you in this setting prior, and then you can determine whether or not you would like me to bring these issues to the park board. So I have one for you. I've been approached by a resident that is interested in turning some of our hockey rinks into off-leash dog areas. And so I'm wondering if that's something that the park board is interested in entertaining now, in the future.
We covered that at Creek Valley about 2 years ago, didn't we?
Yeah.
Yeah, we did.
Too small.
I think we said no. I mean, there is some use of, in the summer, I mean, kids play soccer in those hockey rinks. There was a proximity issue, I remember, with Creek Valley with some of the homes, and some people were concerned about that. Doesn't anybody remember that?
Yeah, my daughter was at Creek Valley at the time, and it was an issue of having people come from outside the community close to the school, and the safety factor with the children at the school. But you know, our hockey rinks are located in many different locations, and this is not a proposal to use all of them as dog parks, but maybe 1 or 2 would work. I'd like to be open-minded about it.
They strike me as way too small, to be honest. I mean, you're potentially concentrating a lot of dogs and a lot of what dogs leave behind in a relatively small space. It doesn't seem viable on the surface of it to me. A hockey rink is just not that big. I mean, even when you have large dog parks, they're a mess. So I don't know. It doesn't seem on the surface of it viable.
How about the dog park that exists but doesn't exist on 44th and France, on the Edina Minneapolis border? I know there has been some discussion on and off whether we formalize that as a dog park, but where are we at with that?
You're right, Joseph. We have had discussions. That property is owned by the city of Minneapolis, and the city of Edina, the city of St. Louis Park, and the city of Minneapolis have had discussions about that site in many times over the years. Most recently, the city of Minneapolis contacted both us and St. Louis Park for a meeting downtown to express possible interest in selling that property. Again, that was within the last year for sure. And we definitely expressed interest in hearing a little bit more in terms of an offer, both St. Louis Park and the city of Edina, and we haven't heard from them since. It moves slowly in Minneapolis, I know, but we will definitely be open to that if we're approached.
Residents who, Van Valkenburg is our only dog park, and it's all the way on the western side of Edina. For residents who have dogs on the eastern side of Edina, it's a real far drive to go. You know, I'd like to be open to the possibility of maybe a park on the other side of town that could be used.
So from personal experience, I live right by Fairview Southdale Hospital. And so it is quite a haul. If I could pop into Pamela Park's ice rink for 10 minutes and let my 5-pounder and 10-pounder run around, I'd get a lot more sleep at night. So I don't want to have the policing issues and have this like formal location type thing. But if there's any opportunity to, have residents let their dogs run around for 15 minutes and a little more informal than the Van Valkenburg Park, where that's kind of a destination. Whereas I'm seeing like a Pamela Park where you kind of walk through, give your dog a little time to run around on its own and keep going.
You're going to have a lot of people that are come out in opposition anytime you're going to talk about a dog park near homes, and a lot of those hockey rinks are near homes. So that's where I mentioned, like when we were looking at that York Park, there aren't homes there, and I mean that could be one possibility for that park.
Yeah, that's my first reaction is exactly that. We have schools and hockey rinks and certain park facilities in certain areas for a reason. I'm a dog lover, I'm a dog owner, but yeah, you're gonna have some noise, and you have other issues, and there's reasons why we put parks in certain locations. So,
well, and it's. I mean, unless you're going to put some size limitation on who can use it, it isn't going to be 5-pounders. It isn't going to be all 5-pounders in there. It's going to be let my bull mastiff run around for a little while. Yeah, exactly. Light snack before bedtime. So, I mean, that's why I think I just look at the size. That's my only, it's like, a hockey rink is, I mean, what are we talking, 150 feet?
Yeah, or there could be a limit of amount that can be in there at a time. Because that would keep the noise down.
Actually, that's what I was thinking. I think that we should put it on an agenda for a full agenda item, and I think that one of the options may be that there's either number of allow, when I'm walking my dog and there's no one in the park at all, and I would like to let them run off leash, I don't see that there should be any problem with having my dog run around the hockey rink. So that would be a suggestion that we could talk about at a future meeting.
I think that's fine as long as there's just very tight parameters. As Louise had mentioned, we're not talking about all parks, because there's going to be a number of parks that are by schools, have playgrounds right by the hockey rink. There's going to be a number of limiting factors that it's probably going to be relatively few, that have the hockey rinks and are also going to be in any way suitable.
Can I suggest before it becomes an agenda item, we do a quick scope and see if there are any that are actually viable, given that they can't be by schools and they can't be by playground areas and assorted other things, and by homes. I'm trying to think of the rink that would.
Possibly Pamela. Yeah, maybe possibly Lewis, where the rink is there too.
I'd be more than happy to put together a list if you'd like to give it a little bit more thought, and we can talk about it at the next meeting.
And see if do other cities do this or allow it. Might be interesting.
The resident that brought this forward did quite a bit of research, and I know that there was one surrounding city that did allow it, but it was only at one or two parks.
Okay.
I guess I would ask that you an eye towards distribution, equal distribution throughout the city. So, something that would make sense on the east side if there's such a thing.
And also, I have no idea what the maintenance is of the dog park. Like, if you allow dogs off leash, does that automatically mean that there's going to be additional maintenance? And I think that the answer is going to be yes. But I'm wondering how much that would be and how that would work.
Any other suggestions?
That's helpful. Thank you. I'll put together a list, and we can have another brief discussion at the next meeting and decide how you'd like to proceed. Thank you.
All right. Seeing no other items on the agenda, is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn. Second.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Adjourn.